I visited the cathedral, the Palazzo Vecchio, the Loggia de Lanzi, and stood for a long while on the banks of the Arno. My gaze returned time and again to the ancient marvels of Florence. The domes and towers were delicately outlined against the cloudless sky. The yellow river churned under the wide arches of the splendid bridge, and around the town lay a circle of green hills dotted with slender cypresses, mansions, palaces, and cloisters. It was another world, joyful, sensuous, and laughing. Even the countryside had none of the sober melancholy of our landscapes. The hills were bathed in sunlight, and each little villa stood out in its whitewashed brilliance. The people here are less serious than we are. They think less, but they seem happier. They say it is easier to die in the south. I now know that there can be such a thing as a rose without a thorn, sensuality free from torment. Wanda discovered a charming little house which she has rented for the summer. It is perched on a pleasant hill on the left bank of the Arno, opposite the Cascine, and has a beautiful garden with a bower, a lawn, and a delightful alley bordered with camellias. It is built in the quadrangular Italian style and has 2 stories only. An open gallery runs along one side of the house, a sort of loggia with plaster casts of ancient statues. A few stone steps lead down into the garden. From the gallery one enters the bathroom, with a magnificent marble basin, and a spiral staircase leading up to my mistress's bedroom. Wanda is to occupy the first floor, and I have been assigned a room on the ground floor, which is very pleasant and even has a fireplace. I explored the garden and discovered a little temple built on a mound. It was locked, but on peering through a chink in the door, I beheld the goddess of love standing on a white pedestal. A shiver ran through me. She seemed to smile at me and say, "Is it you? I have been expecting you." Toward evening, a pretty little maid brought me orders to appear before my mistress. I climbed the wide marble stairs, passed through the antechamber, which is a large, extravagantly furnished drawing room, and knocked on the bedroom door. I knocked softly, intimidated by the luxury displayed around me. She did not hear me, and I was left standing in front of the door. For a moment I imagined that I was waiting before the great Catherine's bedroom, and that she was about to appear in a green morning dress with fur trimmings, the red ribbon of her order across her naked breasts, and her knee curls whitely powdered. I knocked again. Wanda flung the door open impatiently. "Why so late?" she asked. "I was standing in front of the door, but you did not hear me knock," I replied timidly. She closed the door, slipped her arm into mine, and led me to the red damask ottoman on which she had been reclining. The room was entirely furnished in red, the carpet, the curtains, the hangings, and the canopy above the bed. A fine painting showing Samson and Delilah decorated the ceiling. Wanda received me in captivating déshabillé, a white satin morning dress that molded her slender body and fell in graceful folds, and over her bare shoulders a green velvet jacket edged with fur. Her red mane, casually retained by a string of black pearls, tumbled down to her hips. "Venus in furs," I murmured, as she drew me to her breast and smothered me with kisses. I was speechless and even beyond thought, carried away in a storm of ecstasy. Wanda gently disengaged herself from my embrace and gazed at me, resting her head on her hand. I fell at her feet, and she drew me to her and played with my hair. "Do you still love me?" she asked, her eyes misty with gentle rapture. "How can you ask such a question?" "Do you remember your oath?" she continued, with a charming smile. "Now that all is ready and in order, I ask you once again, are you in earnest? Do you really wish to be my slave?" "Am I not prepared for it?" I asked with surprise. "You have not signed the papers yet." "Papers? What papers?" "Ah, you see, you have forgotten already," she said. "Then let us drop the whole matter." "But Wanda," I said, "you know that nothing gives me greater bliss than to serve you and be your slave. I will give anything to be entirely at your mercy, to feel that my whole life lies in your hands." "How well enthusiasm becomes you," she murmured. "How handsome you are when you speak with such passion. Ah, I am more than ever in love with you, and yet I must be haughty, severe, and cruel toward you. I am afraid it will be impossible for me." "Have no fears," I said with a smile. "Where are the papers?" "Here." She pulled them out of her bodice, a little embarrassed, and handed them to me. So that you will know what it feels like to be entirely in my hands, I have drafted another statement according to which you undertake to put an end to your life. Thus, I can even kill you if it pleases me to do so. Let me see. While I looked at the documents, Wanda went to fetch pen and ink. She then sat next to me, put her arm around my neck, and peered over my shoulder. The first document read as follows. Agreement between Mrs. Wanda von Donahue and Mr. Severin von Kuziemski. Mr. Severin von Kuziemski ceases from this date to be the fiancé of Mrs. Wanda von Donahue and renounces all rights pertaining to this state. In return, he undertakes, on his word as a man and a gentleman, to be the slave of this lady, until such time as she sets him at liberty. As the slave of Mrs. von Donahue, he will take the name of Gregor, and will undertake to satisfy all the wishes of his mistress, to obey all her orders, to submit to her, and to regard the slightest kindness on her part as an extraordinary favor. Mrs. von Donahue may not only chastise her slave for the slightest negligence or misdemeanor, as and when she wishes, but she will also have the right to maltreat him according to her humor, or even simply to amuse herself. She is also entitled to kill him if she so wishes. In short, he becomes her absolute property. Should Mrs. von Donahue ever set her slave at liberty, Mr. von Kuziemski agrees to forget everything he has experienced or undergone in his capacity as slave, and will not entertain, under any pretext or in any manner, the thought of vengeance or reprisal. In return, Mrs. von Donahue promises, in her capacity as his mistress, to appear as often as possible in furs, particularly when she is being cruel toward her slave. The contract bore today's date. The second document contained only a few words. Having been for many years weary of existence and the disappointments it brings, I have willfully ended my useless life. A profound horror gripped me on reading these lines. It was still possible to turn back, but I was carried away by the madness of passion and the sight of the lovely creature nestling languidly against my breast. You must copy this one out, Severin, said Wanda, pointing to the second document. It must be in your own hand. As for the contract, it will of course not be necessary. I quickly copied out the note confirming my suicide and handed it to Wanda. She read it over and laid it on the table with a smile. Now are you brave enough to sign this one? She asked, leaning her head to one side with a sweet smile. I took up the pen. Let me sign first, said Wanda. Your hand is shaking. Are you so afraid of happiness? She snatched away the contract and the pen. In my hesitation, I gazed up for a moment, and only then did I realize the utter lack of historical character in the painting above me, as happens so often with painters of the Italian and Dutch schools. This gave it an uncanny quality. Delilah, an opulent creature with flaming red hair, reclines half naked on a red ottoman, a sable cloak about her shoulders. She smiles and leans towards Samson, who has been bound and thrown at her feet by the Philistines. Her teasing, coquettish smile seems the very summit of cruelty. With half-closed eyes she gazes at Samson, while he regards her longingly, crazed with love. Already his enemy has laid a knee on his chest and is about to blind him with the white-hot sword. That's that, said Wanda. But you look quite lost. What is the matter? Everything will be as it was, even after you have signed. Surely you know me, dear heart. She had placed her bold signature to the contract. I looked once more into those eyes that held me in their bewitching power, and then took up the pen. You are shaking, said Wanda calmly. Shall I guide your hand? She gently took hold of my hand, and my name appeared at the bottom of the contract. She read the two documents once more and placed them in the drawer of the table that stood by the ottoman. Good. Now give me your passport and your money. I took out my pocketbook and handed it to her. She examined the contents, nodded, and put it away with the rest. I then knelt down before her in sweet rapture and laid my head on her breast. Suddenly she kicked me away, leapt up, and pulled the bell rope. 3 slender young negresses appeared, like ebony carvings, all dressed in red satin and each with a rope in her hand. Realizing my situation, I tried to rise, but Wanda turned her lovely cold face toward me, with its dark brows and mocking eyes, and confronted me in the stance of a domineering mistress. She signaled, and before I knew what was happening, the three negresses had thrown me to the ground, tied my hands and feet, and secured my arms behind me like a man about to be executed. I could hardly move an inch. "Give me the whip, Haidee," ordered Wanda, with chilling composure. The negress handed her mistress the whip on bended knee. "Take off my fur, it hinders me." The negress obeyed. "The jacket, over there." Haidee promptly brought the ermine-trimmed casabeca from the bed, and Wanda slipped it on with her inimitable grace. "Tie him to the pillar here." The blackamoors lifted me, wound a stout rope around my body, and tied me upright to one of the massive pillars that held up the canopy of the big Italian bed. Then they vanished suddenly as though the earth had swallowed them up. Wanda stepped forward briskly. Her white satin dress flowed behind her in a long silver train, like moonlight. Her hair flared like flames over the white fur of the jacket. Now she stood before me, her left hand on her hip, the whip in her right hand. She let out a peal of laughter. "The game is over," she said coldly. "Now we are in deadly earnest, you senseless fellow. I despise the blind fool who puts himself at the mercy of a vain and capricious woman. You are no longer my lover, but my slave. Your life and death are subject to my whims. You shall know me now. First of all, you shall taste the whip, seriously this time, and without having deserved it, so that you will know what awaits you if you are ever clumsy, disobedient, or rebellious." At these words, she turned back her ermine cuffs with a gesture both graceful and savage, and lashed me across the back. I shuddered as the whip cut into my flesh like a knife. "Well, how do you like that?" she exclaimed. I was silent. "You will see. I shall make you whimper like a dog beneath my lash," she said threateningly, and she began to whip me again. The blows fell thick and fast with dreadful force on my back, arms, and neck. I clenched my teeth not to cry out loud. Then she struck me full in the face. The warm blood began to run, but she laughed and continued to whip me. "I am only just beginning to understand you," she cried. "What a treat to have someone in one's power, especially a man who loves one. For you do love me, do you not? My pleasure grows with each blow. I shall tear you to shreds. Go on, writhe with pain, cry out, scream. You cannot arouse my pity." Finally, she seemed to grow tired. She dropped the whip, lay back on the ottoman, and rang the bell. The negresses entered. "Untie him." When they loosened the ropes, I fell to the ground like a log. The dusky creatures laughed, showing their white teeth. "Undo the rope around his feet." They did so, and I was able to rise. "Come and see me, Gregor." I approached my cruel, mocking beauty, who seemed more seductive than ever before. "One step nearer," ordered Wanda. "Kneel and kiss my foot." She held out her foot beneath the white satin hem, and like the supersensitive madman that I was, I pressed my lips to it. "You will not see me for a whole month, Gregor," she said solemnly. "I must become a stranger to you, so that our new relations may be easier for you to accept. You will work in the garden and await further orders. Away, slave."